Now I'm on. All right. Well, now I'm really on. It was my fault, guys. It's good to see you guys this morning. If you're a first-time guest, my name is Austin, and I'm the lead pastor here. It's an awesome privilege to be able to pastor a bunch of nutcases that want to go change the world, and so I love coming to teach every Sunday. It's like pregame. I can't hardly sleep on Saturday nights. I get all wound up, and I get up in the morning. I go through my ritual, and lately I've been going through it at Panera Bread, and so I go this morning, and I start bumping into people who are affiliated with our church. And so I was almost late to the 8 o'clock service because I kept bumping into folks. And so I was like, I got to find me a new hiding spot where I'll go get my pregame and, get my pregame meal on and get all focused. But I cannot tell you how blessed I am, first to be a child of God and foremost, but to be able to live out my faith with you guys is just a ball. Now, I was about to smack my table. I've been told I'm not allowed to smack my table. And for those of you who go here, know that's going to be really hard. But luckily, we're in the South, and rednecks know how to engineer stuff. So all the screws fell out of my table, so they duct taped it together, right? And y'all know down here, now if you're from up north, let me help you, okay? No matter what breaks, if the tire falls off of your car, down here, duct tape. You just buy some duct tape, tape the wheel right back to the car and get going. It don't matter. If your leg is cut off, you just duct tape it. You go to the doctor so he can replace the duct tape with some stitches, only if you feel it's necessary. All right, so it pretty much fixes everything. So anyway, they told me not to smack my table or it may go flying and cause a scene. So anyway, if you're here this morning, first time we've been studying through the Gospels, we're talking about Jesus, who is the God-man. He is both God and man. These signs up here are not some ego thing for me. All right, so we're talking about Jesus, and we've spent the year specifically looking at the teachings of Jesus on his identity. Who does Jesus say he is? Next year, we're going to continue this series, but we're going to change gears and begin looking at what he teaches on spirituality. And what he taught about spirituality was absolutely revolutionary. Jesus is accredited as even atheist historians say that Jesus Christ is the most revolutionary human being that ever lived. He absolutely revolutionized the way the world exists. Even if you don't believe he's God, you certainly must believe he's a man. Now, there is some loony professor in London who's getting all this credit for trying to say Jesus never even existed. But that's kind of ridiculous. But nonetheless, most people that are sane realize Jesus existed, and he lived a life that absolutely revolutionized the world as we know it. And so many attribute him as the greatest revolutionary thinker or person that's ever existed. What I want to do with you this morning, I don't do anything to you. What I want to do with you this morning is look at the Gospels and see where Jesus taught that it wasn't just revolutionary actions, but that his very identity, who he is a revolutionary. It's one thing to do revolutionary things. It's a whole nother thing to be a revolutionary. And so that's what I want to kind of strive with you this morning and look at. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to look at some distinctions, some characteristics of revolutionaries in general. And then we're going to look at in the life of Jesus and see where that was actually part, not just of his actions, but of who he is. Where did Jesus bring that out? So this morning, if you got your bulletin, you kind of walk with me, take some notes, open that thing up. We don't just kill trees for the fun of it. We kill them so we can write all over them. All right, so there's bullets in there, and you can take some notes and then go home and kind of study this stuff on your own. So what's the first characteristic of a revolutionary? A revolutionary is radically committed to changing the norm into something significantly different. All right, significantly different. H.G. Wells was kind of he was an intellectual revolutionary, an author, an artist. He wrote all these novels and things, and he's accredited to be the first science fiction writer ever. And so if you like science, I know Blake Harris, he loves science fiction movies and things. And so you're quite the opposite. I like picking on him. You got your little costume, don't you? So anyway, revolutionary writer here. He wrote, many of you maybe have read some of his stuff. But anyway, H.G. Wells said this. He said, the doctrine of the kingdom of heaven, which was the main teaching of Jesus, is certainly one of the most revolutionary doctrines that has ever stirred and changed human thought. It absolutely revolutionized human thinking. What was that? Well, the probably most central passage on this commitment that he had as a person to significantly change the world, it came out in John 4. And we're going to really digest this passage next year when we're talking about the teachings of Jesus on spirituality. But just real quickly this morning, I want to make one point out of this. In John 4:19, it says, The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you're a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is here, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship Him. God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and truth." Now, for some of you going, "I don't understand why that's so radical." Well, it's so radical because human thinking always equates God and knowing God with religion. And religion must take place in a building. It has to take place on days. It has to have rules and systems. Jesus did not come to alter it or tweak it. He came and He said, "I fulfilled the law. The law's over. Religion's done. It was great. It served its purpose. It's over. I'm creating something radically different, something totally contrary to this whole concept." People go, "Well, I love when people ask me this. They come to me and say, "So, preacher, where's your church? Where's your church at?" And I go, "Well, they're in Gaston, Cleveland, and Lincoln County, and Mecklenburg, and you know, they're even some down in South Carolina." And they go, No, I mean, where's your church? Where's your church?" "Well, it's in Gaston, Cleveland, Lincoln County, and Mecklenburg, and down. No, you know what I'm saying." And I do that just to spite them because I do know what they're saying. They're wanting to know where our church building is. And then I have the fun answer of saying, "Oh, we don't have a church building." And they're like, "Huh?" And it just gets them all messed up. Then they're just like, that is so revolutionary. It's crazy that it is, but it's revolutionary in our country. Church is a building. That's where you go. That was going on 2,000 years ago. There's nothing new. This woman's saying, which mountain do we go worship on? Not in the sense of the mountain, but what temple am I supposed to go worship? On this mountain, in ours, or in Jerusalem at the temple? Where am I supposed to go to worship God? What method or system am I supposed to have? Where's the sacrifice supposed to take place? And Jesus says, none of that matters anymore. You get to be a child of God. You get to know God personally. You become a child of God, and you worship Him as a father and a son. You get to know Him in that way. And now some of you are going, "I still don't understand why that's revolutionary." Come back next year. We're going to spend all year talking about it, all right? But just understand this. This lady's looking at him going, "Huh?" I mean, for 3.5 years, Jesus walked around and said this stuff, and everybody just stared. He'd heal somebody, yay! Jesus would go, "Man, you can know God personally. You don't need the law anymore." Oh, so anyway, when we got this, Jesus heal somebody else. Just totally blew their minds. Second, a revolutionary lives sacrificially for his cause. A revolutionary is a radical commitment to change the norm into something completely different. If it's not completely different, then it's not real revolutionary. But a revolutionary also lives sacrificially for his cause. John Updike, a famous author, said, "Being naked approaches being revolutionary. Going barefoot is mere populism." I love people that consider themselves revolutionaries, but they're essentially barefoot for their cause. You get naked for your cause, you're committed. You know, I don't know. I had a dream last night that I showed up this morning only in my underwear. Maybe I'm trying to be revolutionary. I don't know. I was all pumped up for my sermon. It was a really weird dream. Jimmy Ray I didn't get a chance to tell my wife. Jimmy, in my dream, goes, "Hey, Austin, you know you're in your underwear?" And I was about to walk out and preach. I was like, "Oh, no, just sing." And I drive all the way home. I miss the whole worship service. I wake up, I'm a nervous wreck. And anyway, so revolutionaries live sacrificially for their cause. Where do we see this in the life of Jesus? Well, Jesus had a total willingness to sacrifice material wealth and personal comfort. He owned nothing, all right? Jesus owned nothing. He had a pair of sandals and a tunic, all right? He owned nothing. He didn't have a house. He didn't have anything. And listen, if there was ever a person that existed that could have been wealthy, it's Jesus. I mean, think about this for a moment. How much would you pay to have a life insurance policy that guaranteed when you died, He would immediately raise you from the dead? Because He was capable of that. He went and raised Lazarus from the dead. "Hey, Jesus, can you hook me up with that? If I fall off the mule and break my neck, can you just raise me from the dead? You know, Jesus, I'm blind. Can you heal me? Here's some money. Jesus, I'm crippled. Here's some money." I mean, look how much money doctors make. Imagine if you could actually just go, and be healed. I mean, Jesus had the opportunity to make a ton of money, absolute massive amount of it, but he didn't come for money. He came for his cause to bring mankind into a relationship with God and to be the sacrifice for sin to accomplish it. And so in Matthew 4, verse 1, it says, "Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil, and after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. And the tempter came and said to him, 'If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread.' But he answered, 'It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God.'" Jesus had no interest in it. Is there anything wrong with making money? No, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But Jesus was so committed to his cause, he didn't have time for it. His cause was to come and die. Simple as that. Where else do we see this sacrificial nature of a revolutionary in his life? Well, there's a total willingness to sacrifice earthly fame. He wasn't interested in being famous at all. He was interested to come to accomplish his task, his cause. In Matthew 4, 8 through 10, it says, "Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain." It's kind of interesting, and it's ridiculous that Satan thought he could do this, but nonetheless. "Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to them, 'All these I will give you if you fall down and worship me.' Then Jesus said to him without a bat of an eye, 'Begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve.'" Jesus wasn't interested in fame. If he was, again, he had a perfect avenue for that. When you study the Gospels, you'll find out that on many occasions when Jesus would heal somebody, this really odd thing would happen. He would heal somebody, and then he would say to them, "Now, if you and I did that, I will promise you, my prideful, arrogant self, if I were to go here, if there was some blind dude and I went by and spat in some ground and rubbed the dirt in his eyes and suddenly he could see, I'd be like, 'Yo, do you see what I just did?' Now, I would be biblical enough to go, 'Look what God did through me.' You know what I'm saying? But all of us would be like, 'Man, I was just blind, and then I put some blood in his eyes, and we'd all be excited, right? I'd wear a white polyester suit and invite everybody to come to the Coliseum and pay me money. I mean, that's what we would do. So, Jesus, on the other hand, heals a guy, and then he says, "Don't tell anybody." Huh? Don't tell anybody. Now, he didn't do that always, but on many occasions, he would heal people like, "Don't tell nobody." Why would he do that? Because he wasn't trying to be famous. He wasn't trying to get a gigantic crowd of people around him going, "Oh, Jesus, Jesus, happy, happy." That wasn't his goal. His goal was to save mankind. He was preaching the kingdom of God, and he came to die, which leads to this third example of his sacrificial living. He sacrificed the fame that he could gain through mankind, all the favoritism that he could have got by just simply taking his talents and serving man and proclaiming his greatness and majesty before them. He would have been infinitely famous, infinitely rich, but he didn't do either. As a matter of fact, he not only sacrificed his comfort, his finances, and his fame, he also sacrifices his life, as we all know, right? He had a total willingness to die for the cause. But I want to point out one aspect of that death this morning that maybe you've never thought about. In Matthew 26:39, there's this interesting statement. When we talk about the life of Jesus, most of us know we're talking about a person who's the Son of God. We got the God side of the God-man formula down pretty well in our head. But it's significant for us to remember he is the God-man. He's 100% God, but he's also 100% man. He functions as a human being. And in Matthew 26, verse 39, we see this humanness. This is what it says. Going a little farther, he fell on his face. This is Jesus. He falls down on his face. That's an act of desperation. He falls on his face and prayed, saying, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me." He's talking about the cross. "Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." Now see, what happens when we only see Jesus as God and not God-man, then we're justifiably not blown away by the sacrifice on the cross. I mean, he's God, right? He spoke the world into motion. He just, and there it exists. There was nothing, and then God said, "Be something," and something came from nothing, all right? He's eternal God. He has no birthday. He's existed forever. On the God side of Jesus, he is the Logos. He is the Word of God, and he has existed for eternity as God and with God and being God. It's a mind-boggling concept, but nonetheless, in that, he also takes on the form of man in Jesus Christ. He becomes man and he lives among us. And he lives among us in the sense of being among us. He lives as one of us. And so here, the man side of Jesus, the Jesus part of the Christ, is in this garden. He knows what's about to happen. What's about to happen is the wrath of God, the eternally immeasurable wrath of God. All right, you can't measure it. All right, the wrath of God is absolutely immeasurable in the sense of you can't be like, well, it hurts this bad. All right, the wrath of God is eternal suffering in its length, and it's eternal suffering in its measure of suffering, and the actual how bad it hurts. So on a scale, I love it when you're at the hospital. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad does it hurt? I want to be like, 50, give me morphine. It's, sir, you just have a broke finger. Yeah, but morphine feels good. Just give me the morphine. All right, that sounds like a drug addict. All right, so y'all know y'all go to the hospital, they give you that button. You ever have surgery? They give you a little button. Sorry. I remember the first time I had my shoulder operation, and I had the first of the many. And so anyway, I had my shoulder operated, and I wanted to be the tough guy, and they came in, they said, how's your pain, 1 to 10? I was like, I'm a 5. And they said, well, have you been using your clicker thing? And I was like, oh, not too much. And it says, well, it says in the last hour you clicked it 165 times. Are you sure you're not in pain? I was like, well, I just thought it was an Atari game. Atari, I was playing Space Invader. Anyway, Jesus, my ADD kicked in. Jesus Christ, as the human side, is seeing this tidal wave of the wrath of God coming at him. The wrath of God that you and I are to suffer because of our sin. Now I want you to imagine it. The wrath that I am to suffer, the eternal damnation of my soul because of my sin and my separation from God. An eternal suffering that is eternal in its length and eternal in its nature. That multiplied times the billions of people in the world, all in the same condition. And Jesus is about to suffer that wrath that is destined for all of us. He is about to consume all of that within himself, not just as God, but as the God-man. And so we see him in the garden absolutely on his face. He falls on his face. And he says, if there's any other way, let it be. But I'm committed to this cause. And if this is the only way, I will do it. That's what revolutionaries do. They know how painful and awful it's going to be, but they are committed to that cause. And it doesn't matter how much they have to suffer, even if it means they have to die the most horrid death in the world, they are committed to it and they will not quit, because that's how revolutionaries think. He was a revolutionary. Third, a revolutionary is laser focused on his cause. Everything in his life comes back to it. They're annoying. Revolutionary people are hard to talk to because everything in their life comes back to it. It doesn't matter what it is. John Adams, one of the founders of our country, said, I must study politics and war that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. The founders of our nation were obsessive, compulsive people who were just absolutely consumed with creating a nation free from England that was independent of itself, that ruled itself, that had liberty and life and the right to pursue happiness in each one of us. And so they were consumed with this to the point that John Adams, who could have been a millionaire, studied politics and war. Most of the men who founded this country were millionaires of their time, but most of them died in utter poverty, many of them giving their lives for the cause to create this nation. That's how revolutionaries think. That's why we call them revolutionaries. Jesus was no different. He was obsessed with it, all right, just obsessed with it. No matter where he was, it always went back to this subject. In Luke chapter 9, here's an example. Just laser, everything always comes back to his cause. In Luke chapter 9, verse 42, it says, while he was coming, the demon threw him to the ground and convulsed him. Not Jesus, but this boy. Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, heals the boy, gives the boy back to his father. Pretty cool event. Some of you might think your children are demon-possessed and would only wish Jesus would come by and heal them as well, right? So this father has got to be pretty happy. His son, who is demon-possessed, he goes on his convulsions, imagine cussing, screaming, yelling, beating everything around him, going absolutely nuts and crazy. Jesus heals this boy. Verse 43, and all were astonished at the majesty of God. But while they are marveling at everything he was doing, and when it says marveling, they're not just staring there gawking, they're all talking about, did you see that, man? Did you see he healed this boy? Wasn't that amazing? Man, I want to get my son. I want to bring my son to be healed. This is cool. Jesus, how'd you do it? What angle did you take? What was your system? Give me 12 practices where I can accomplish the same thing. So you had all the guys who were planners and stuff. They're trying to figure out how he did it. You had all the people who were like, groupies. They're like, ooh, we're going to be the Jesus groupies. Look, he healed the boy. And so everybody's just kind of making all this big deal and fuss about this boy being healed because it's a big deal. But what does Jesus do? As the obsessive-compulsive revolutionary that he is, because that's how they are, he doesn't even let them enjoy the fact that the boy just gets healed. All right? We can't just be happy the boy gets healed. Nope. Jesus has got to come along and change the subject. It says, and all were astonished at the majesty of God, but while they were all marveling at everything he was doing, and this is a good thing, Jesus says to his disciples, let these words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men. You had to go bring that up again, didn't you, Jesus? You had to go bring it up again. Why are you so bent on dying? Because that's why I came. Remember at one point Peter goes to Jesus after Jesus tells them and says, listen, man, I've come to die. And Peter goes, listen, Jesus, don't say that. That's not cool, Jesus. Don't you say that kind of stuff. You know all those people out there, you think they're going to follow us around if they hear you're going to die? Jesus very patiently looks at him and says, get away from me, Satan. I've come to die. Shut your hole, Peter. Be quiet. Go. Obsessive compulsive. You get around. I mean, imagine. People who are revolutionaries. Imagine what it must have been like. I could try to imagine what it must have been like to hang out with Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and those guys, They were probably annoying people to be with. You start trying to talk about, I went and got my hair cut the other day. And George Washington would pipe up and go, haircut. Now, when you cut that hair, what did you do with it? Because you could probably put that hair together. Oh, I got an idea. We could make some interesting camouflage with that hair. And then when the Brits would come in, then maybe we could deflect some of the sunlight. Oh, that you could see Jefferson. Ooh, that would be cool. And they would all kind of start piping in, And you try to change the subject. Yeah, well, I don't know what kind of games they played then. We're going to play some polo, on the horse. And you hear Washington chime in again. Polo, yeah, I was watching a polo game the other day, and I was amazed at how the horses were moving. And I thought, we need to get those trainers to come train our cavalry so that when we're engaging England, we could really whoop those redcoats better. And there it goes back to revolution again. So you kind of imagine you trying something else, something like, I was out hunting. Oh, I shouldn't have brought that up. Yeah, I was hunting the other day. Boy, they got this new rifle. We could really bust some our Revolutionary Army could really bust some redcoats in the face with this new rifle I got. We got to figure out how to multiply. Like everything would have gone back to that conversation. That's how revolutionaries think. They're laser focused. They're obsessive compulsive. There's a guy in our church named Roger Self. He's obsessive compulsive, right? But in the right area. We almost have to remind Roger that the church is almost broke and we really need his business to be successful because he's so consumed with this ministry changing the world. I'm like, Roger, please make it grow. Your tithe is really important around here. Our thermostat's real low, hint. But he lives the gospel in his ministry. I love hearing him talk about all the different people that he builds relationships with and his customers. I've gone out with him and met some of these guys, and all these customers he sees, he'll have these 5-hour-long conversations with these folks about their life and their marriage and blah, 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 and he'd call me up and be like, oh, man, I totally forgot about selling a contract to him. It's just because he's so obsessed with the gospel, he sees his business, Southeastern Loss Management, as an opportunity for the gospel, and he happens to make money at it, which right now we really need that, Roger, so make it work, we got guys in here. It's a trip. This guy named Joe Padilla in our church. I don't know if he's even here today. Joe Padilla. Joe Padilla works for TSA. And he started coming, and he's getting plugged in. He's really grown in leadership here. And he caught a vision for being a revolutionary for Christ in TSA. And now, we got all these TSA employees. You hear all these people making fun of TSA. You know why I don't? Because they could get the last laugh when I go to the airport, And when everybody was like, yeah, TSA, they're groping everybody. I was like, grope me, I don't care, Because they, what I'm saying? They would have some big hairy guy come out with gloves. There's Rammel, They got me one time going to the airport. We were on our way to Africa, and we were kind of nervous, and you're just worried something's going to happen. We're on the thing, and it's like 6 o'clock in the morning. Carrie and I are kind of half asleep, pumped up, and thinking about all this 20-hour trip we got, and I'm on the little, moving sidewalk thing. We've already got through security. And I've traveled a lot, so I kind of understand some of these things, like when it comes to security, like what they expect and don't. And so anyway, I'm on this conveyor belt, and I suddenly hear, "Sir, we need to check your bag." So immediately in my mind, I think, oh gosh, Ari has put some of his Play-Doh in my bag, and they think I've got a plastic explosive. And I'm like, we're never getting on the plane. It's kind of all this is going through my head as I turn, and it's one of the TSA guys that goes to our church. He's like, "Oh, gotcha." But you know the reason why we have all these TSA guys in our church? Because somebody that was going here caught a vision, and their vision in life is not, look, obviously if Joe didn't work hard as a TSA employee, they would fire Joe. All right? He's got a poor, but he sees TSA as an opportunity for the gospel because he has to work with people who need the gospel. Stephen Ryan goes to our church. He works at Stablis. Messed up and called it Timken earlier. Timken's a good place too, but Stablis. I don't know what Stablis makes, but it's seemingly they start making Christians now. Because every time I turn around, I'm meeting somebody from Stablis that has been influenced to the gospel through the men in our church that work at Stablis. So for them, working at Stablis is a great thing. It not only pays the bills, but it gives me the opportunity to build relationships with people to know Christ. Laser focused. I tell every kid I ever meet, listen, you get to go to high school and middle school. Huh? I get to go to school? One, it's a free education that keeps you from poverty. Isn't that nice? I don't want to go to school. Okay, we can live the rest of your life sucking your thumb, eating saltine crackers. Or you could go to school, do your homework, right? But the other side of that is, think of all the students there that don't have the gospel, and you get to know them. You get to bring the gospel to them every day. I can't go there. I'm not allowed. We've officially said our teachers can't give you the gospel. We, kick God out of the schools. But we didn't kick God out of the schools because Christian kids get to go to school. And so they get to bring the gospel to the school every day. That's called revolutionary thinking. Revolutionary thinking is that you understand your business, your job, your neighborhood is not there for your entertainment. It is there for your mission. You get to have that job because you get to bring the gospel and you get to be a revolutionary with Christ. You and I, when we become revolutionaries like Jesus, everything gets back to the cause. And the cause is the salvation of souls. The cause is that there are over 200,000 people in Gaston and Lincoln County who are separated from God and need Jesus Christ. That is the cause. And so every single day that people sit around in churches sucking their thumb, whining about the stained glass window isn't pretty enough, people are suffering without the gospel. That's our cause. And for Jesus, he was incapable of talking about anything other than that cause. Fourth, a revolutionary is movement-oriented. Very quickly, a revolutionary is movement-oriented, meaning he highly values multiplying the amount of people who can lead beyond him. They value multiplying. A true revolutionary wants people to do bigger things than they did. They want to see the cause because a revolutionary is consumed with their cause, not themselves. They want to multiply people to do bigger and greater things. John Maxwell has become one of the revolutionary leadership thinkers in the world. He was a pastor, and he's like one of the experts on leadership now, and he's invited all over the world to teach and train people who are not even Christians in leadership. And how cool is that as an opportunity, right? But John Maxwell said this: a leader who produces other leaders multiplies their influences. They multiply their cause. They send it out. Jesus Christ in Matthew 16, he said this, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." In John 14, he said this is a trip. "Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these will he do." So, wait, hold. The God-man, Jesus Christ, said, I'm going to do greater things than he. He says, because I'm going to the Father, and whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. Now, unfortunately, this passage has been grotesquely used, all right, to try to... All right, now here's what I mean. If you think that the cause of Christ was to heal blind and physical infirmities, then if you think that was the cause of Christ, that's why he came, that was the revolution he came to do, to be a physical healer, then the context would then tell you that we're going to go physically heal more people than Jesus did. But if the cause of Christ was to bring spiritual life and eternal salvation, then that means something very different. So where are you going with this? You've probably heard me say, if you've been around, people who model their business after Jesus shouldn't be surprised when they go broke. Because Jesus, when he died, he had nothing. He wasn't a really good businessman because he wasn't really interested in being a businessman. Important for you to be a good businessman. Just don't model it after Jesus. If you do, your business is going to stink and all your employees aren't going to have a job. By the same token, we say, I want to model my ministry after Jesus. And a certain aspect is obviously true. But another part of it, you go, well, wait a minute. Jesus says, I want to do greater things through you than I did. In other words, the model that I have set, this thing that I have done, you're going to obliterate that. You're going to blow that out of the water. I mean, look at the life of Jesus. How did Jesus' ministry go? How successful was Jesus in his ministry? Well, it depends on how you evaluate it, but if you evaluate it from like the obvious angle, not real good. Jesus walked around for 3.5 years. Nobody heard a word he said, even though they were listening. They were listening like this, right? Nobody ever got it. His own disciples didn't get it. They were arguing over who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom and blah, blah, blah. I mean, some of the stupidest things you've ever heard in your life came from the very apostles that were walking around with him for 3.5 years. They didn't understand. As soon as he dies, they all run. They're all stuck in their thumb crying, oh, God, what are we going to do now? Jesus died. He told them for 3.5 years he was going to die and rise again 3 days later. So if you want to preach like Jesus, you're saying I'm going to be a totally ineffective preacher. Not one person understood a word he said. Nobody got it. At one point in Luke 12, he says, you hypocrites, how can you not figure out this present time? Nobody understood a word Jesus said for 3.5 years. So apparently you don't want to preach like him. Apparently you don't want to model your ministry after him because he had a gigantic multitude of people who followed him around simply wanting him to heal somebody else and entertain them. And as soon as they got to Jerusalem, they all turned on him and said, crucify him. Not the guy I want to model my ministry after. I love you, but I really don't feel like being crucified by you next week. And so Jesus says to his disciples, listen, you're going to do greater things than me. Are you going to heal more people? That's not the point. The point is the context of Jesus' cause. He's a revolutionary to change lives, to bring people into relationship with God, to save them. All that stuff we're going to talk about next year. That's his cause. And so he says, you're going to be greater at this. So I go, all right, okay, they didn't get it. On the day that Jesus ascended into heaven, he said, listen, you just wait, and you'll know when it's time for you to do what I told you you're going to do. So they go to this room and they're praying. There's this gigantic thing called the Feast of Pentecost, this event where all the men in Jerusalem, all the men of Israel come to Jerusalem. The city is packed and it's crowded. People are wall to wall and sacrifices going on in the temple. It's all this big deal. People have come from hundreds of miles away. They've left their farms and their businesses and they've piled in. They've built tents everywhere. It's kind of like a big, gigantic NASCAR race, all right? And they're just all living in these tents, and there they all are. And the Holy Spirit comes where these disciples were, and he comes and he anoints them with power, and it's time. It's time to start the revolution. It's time to be revolutionaries. They come out of there, and Peter preaches a sermon. He preaches a sermon to all these people who were consumed with religion. He says this sermon to all of them, and thousands on that very day finally get it. And they give their life to Christ and begin to live as revolutionaries. The church in Jerusalem was growing by the thousands every single day. There was no room to put them. They were meeting every day. They were crowded. The temple that was meant for all these religious rituals is now crowded by all these people coming to hear Peter preach. Something totally opposite to what's going on in those sacrifices and teaching for this Pentecost celebration. They overrun the temple. They overrun the city. It multiplies out until the religious leaders go, this ain't cool. One of them was named Saul. Later became Paul, wrote most of the New Testament. They decided this is not cool and we're going to do whatever's necessary to get rid of this movement. And so they went out and they killed a man named Stephen. And then they launched to kill every one of these Christians. And so they dispersed all over the Roman Empire, and everywhere they went, they lived as revolutionaries, and they took the gospel, and they kept preaching it, and kept preaching it, and kept preaching it, and kept preaching it, until the Bible records that literally the Roman leaders and Jewish leaders said the world has been turned upside upside down by these people. And Peter had to remember the day that Jesus said, greater things that you are going to do than even I did as the God-man. I mean, think about that. That wasn't just given to Peter, that was given to all of us. To be absolute revolutionaries. And finally, number 5. A revolutionary is obsessed with his cause. Obsessed. I've talked about in that they can't really converse about anything other than the gospel. They always seem to come back to the church and the movement of God. But there's a willingness also, there is no willingness also to wait or compromise with oneself or anybody else. The cause must succeed and do so as soon as possible. Martin Luther King Jr., one of the great revolutionaries of our time, said, in this revolution, no plans have been written for retreat. I love when people ask me, what is Venture going to do if you guys fail in the vision that God's given you? Well, we just fail, get up, try again. You know? Well, what plan do you have if you fail? We don't have a plan to fail. Failure's not an option. If there's over 200,000 people in Gaston and Lincoln County without the gospel, we don't get to fail. If you think the gospel's a little nice thing that we just give to somebody that they can stick in their pocket and go, I picked up the gospel down at the store the other day. Check it out. Fits nice in my pocket. I have my gospel necklace on with my gospel t-shirt. If you think the gospel is a t-shirt and something you stick in your pocket or hang around your neck or a what would Jesus do bracelet, then there's really no need to be a revolutionary. But if the gospel is the only thing that saves us, the only thing that saves us from an eternal life separated from God in a place called hell, if it's the only thing that gives us the ability to overcome the dumb, idiotic mess in our life, the immaturities in our life, if it's the only thing that can save me, that can save my marriage, that can restore my relationship with my children, if it's the only thing that can give me purpose in life, then we had better get on a horse and move. Now, revolutionaries go, listen, man, either roll with us or sit in the back and suck your thumb. But there's no in between. Jesus was the same way. John 4, verse 31, they came to Jesus, and meanwhile the disciples were urging him, saying, Rabbi, eat, have this meal, take a break, slow down. But he said to them, I have food to eat that you don't know about. So the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him something to eat? So they never got it. And Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. Do you not say there are yet 4 months, then comes the harvest? Look, I tell you, lift up your eyes and see the fields are white for the harvest now. Now. In Luke 12, verse 49, it says, I came to cast fire on earth and wood that would already be kindled. I have a baptism to be baptized with. And how great is my distress until it is accomplished. It's like a horse in the gate. What's he horse in the gate for? To go be slaughtered for the sins of mankind. I mean, imagine that one. Ooh, I can't wait to die. Yay, here we go, here we go, here we go. Jesus was so obsessed with his cause, he was just longing for that day to come where he could die for us and set us free. Matthew 10, verse 34 says, do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a person's enemies will be those in his own household. Now, these are the words of a revolutionary. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. How can a person say that? The only reason a person can say that is if the cause by which they are bringing that into context is so big and so huge and so massively important that nothing else matters. Nothing. The ones who founded our nation knew nothing else mattered except freedom from England. And so they were willing to put their sons and daughters on the line to die and themselves. Everything. It mattered that much. Jesus, without a blink, knew everything and everybody needs to be committed to this. And if they're not, oh well, I'm moving on. don't mistake me for saying that God is not patient and kind and generous with us, because He is. It's called His grace. The flip side of His grace is that He is God, and He is a revolutionary when it comes to you and I, and He has no patience in the sense that, okay, well, you can come on later, you just stay there and live a life of absolute meaningless and total immaturity, but that's okay. You can come with us anyway. No. The other day I was in the truck, picked up my son, and a good friend of mine, I won't tell you his name so you don't go ask him for one too, but a good friend of mine, out of the kindness of his heart, he bought me the new iPhone, and I had the old one, and he bought me the new one. And so my son got excited because, the old one is worth nothing, so I gave it to him so he could play games on and watch movies and listen to songs and make sure you listen to my podcast every day, Sunday, and you listen to Daddy's sermon. And, so he could have that. And so he's had it for a couple weeks now, and he gets in the car. He's been in school all day, all right? He's supposed to be thinking about A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and he gets in the truck. He sits in the truck and he buckles his seatbelt, and, it's good to see you, son. How did school go today? I said, how did school go today? And he answers with this, Daddy, I've been thinking. What's that? It's not fair that you have a 4S and I have a 3G. I was like, oh. And so he was looking for sympathy. Now, he didn't say it ugly. He was saying it like, have sympathy on me. Care. And I didn't at all. Now, some of you parents are dumb enough to be like, okay, I'll buy you a 4S. Listen, the only reason he got the 3G is because somebody was nice enough to get me. I wasn't going to go buy one of them crazy. That thing's expensive, but they bought it for me as a gift. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Nobody's ever bought me a present like this. That's cool, man. And so the only reason my son even has one is because somebody was gracious and kind and felt like they wanted to do this as a gift for me. And so I look at Ari and I said, well, that's nice. And I just kept going. And so he tried a little bit more. He tried to kind of prod me with some more don't you care. And I had in my mind that I was going to explain to him, that, listen, and I kind of thought about, how we say, how we joke about our parents going uphill both ways in the snow, barefooted. Well, I started thinking about that. I remember I was a kid, and we lived in Hampton, Virginia, Southeast Virginia, the 757, babe, right? We live up there, and my great-grandmother lived in Hartsville, South Carolina. And so I felt like everybody in our neighborhood piled into my grandmother Pilkey's 1971 or whatever it was, Mercury. It was as big as this stage. All right, it got like -3 miles to the gallon. It was this huge car, and me and my family and my cousin and his family all got in this Mercury. I don't know how I'm sure it's illegal in a lot of states. So we all piled into this Mercury. It was in the middle of the summer, and we drove down. It had to have been 100,000 degrees inside of that car. The air conditioning wasn't working well. The traffic was horrible. And, we're sitting in there. It was probably 1980, 81, somewhere there. We're in this. It's just awful, and my little cousin's crying. And we're like, stop touching me. You stop touching me. And my little sister, she'd been born. I'll stop touching you. You stop touching me. And all we had to do to entertain ourselves. Y'all remember this? Y'all remember those silly games we used to play in the car? The one where you look for letters on the signs and who can get to the end of the alphabet first? Ooh, I saw the A. B, 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 B. And Q was always so hard. Like, where's a Q when you need one? So you were always looking for quality in. You're going down the road. Q, got it. And then Z, the last one. I never heard of a Z anywhere. So you're driving around, you're looking for some random truck or something. Y'all ever play a game? That was walking up the hill barefooted with no shoes on in the snow. What a horrible, mindless game to play from Hampton all the way to Hartsville, South Carolina. And Satan himself had unleashed hell in the form of heat inside of that Mercury. It was awful. And you got my dad in the front, who now me, reincarnated, right, is going, we will not stop. Hold it. Pee in a bottle. And we're not going anywhere. We're going to get to Hartsville. It's awful. We're never going to get there. But now, my son has a 3G iPhone to play games and watch shows on and to play that, these Angry Birds. I told at 9:30, I said, you get in that game, you'll find out you've been on the toilet for 5 hours and you did not even realize it, and I've missed work today. I'm still in the bathroom. Y'all know y'all play that, right? I didn't mean to say it at 9:30, but being I did, I might as well, right? So you play the Angry Birds, the new one with the flight where you make the airplanes land, and you can absolutely get fired from your job. This games that suck you in. You land the plane, you land the plane, you land the plane, And so now all these kids have all these things. They can watch DVDs and all this stuff. So I did not care that my son felt left out, that he only had a 3G. I'm going, you should have been in the Mercury in 1981. So in part of my mind, I thought I will give him this lecture and help, and I do. My lectures are worse than spankings. I make my children beg me for a spanking. If you can only imagine having a pastor, preacher as your daddy giving you a lecture. They can go on for hours. So anyway, it's going in my mind, thinking I'm going to rationalize this to him, and then the other part of my mind said, I don't care. And so I defaulted to the, I don't care that you feel left out. Now, I'm not trying to take away from the grace of God, but as soon as you and I start whining about, oh God, it's not fair that he makes all that money in his business and I don't make as much money in mine. He doesn't care. Oh God, that person over there, they're this and they're that. God, I remember growing up, God, why'd you give him all the speed? Let me have some of it. Not like the kind you take, but I'm talking about like running speed. I just want to clarify that. Somebody's going, man, I didn't know that. He doesn't care. He really doesn't. He doesn't care about our whining. He says, if you're not willing to take up your cross and follow me, then you're not willing to follow me. Period. End of story. So where's our challenge? I want to wrap up with these two questions, and we're done. First, are you presuming to pull Christ into a non-revolutionary life? Do you somehow think that he cares and that he's going to be involved in a non-revolutionary life? By nature, by his identity, he is a revolutionary and is therefore incapable of functioning inside of complacency. He cannot do it because it is against his very nature. If you're looking for something for God that he is impossible to do, it is impossible for him to sin. It is impossible for him to be non-revolutionary in this world. That is who he is. That is what he's doing. So what does that mean for us as a church? As a church, if we think God cares that the seats at North Gaston aren't that comfortable, then you're wasting your time. He does not care. If you think as a church that it would just be nicer if we had our own nice little building and wouldn't that just be easier, he doesn't care if it's easier. He doesn't care. If you're looking for God to be like, oh, you're right. He doesn't care. If he does, then he has a terrible, sick sense about him in places like, the church in China, where if they don't agree to be the state-sponsored church and preach sermons approved by the state communist China, then they must live illegally as the Church of Christ. And the church in China, most of them choose the illegal one. And they're persecuted because of it daily. So if you think he's worried that you and I have to sacrifice time, talent, and treasure to reach Gaston, Lincoln County, and that makes him really empathize, you are misinterpreting the character and nature of God. He does not, just as I looked at my son and went, I don't care that you want a 4S. God does not care that it would be easier if somebody would just write a check for $2 million and pay for the hub. He's not going to do that. He's not going to do it. Now, maybe he will. God will take it. That means we can start tomorrow. But I'm just saying, the likelihood, he's not going to do that. He is a revolutionary, and he's trying to multiply revolutionaries. If Venture is not willing to live revolutionary to reach Gaston and Lincoln County, then he will simply find somebody else. You hear what I'm saying? By nature, that's what he does. He does not wait around long. People say, Austin, you're so like, we have to do it now, we have to do it now, because I want to be a part of it. I want my son to be a part of it. I want him to see it. And I know the character and nature of God is not to wait. He will simply find somebody else to do it. And I want to be a part of that. You and I have got to understand that as a church. There are 400 churches in Gaston County, yet over 80% of churches in America are plateaued or declining, and that would probably elevate to probably over 90% in Gaston County, if not 95%. The fields are ripe unto harvest. There, as we estimated, between 200 and 240,000 people in Gaston and Lincoln County alone that are not plugged into the body of Christ at any level, and likely not believers in Jesus, because nobody's ever cared enough to serve them and testify of the greatness of God and bring them the gospel. They're not bad people. They're awesome people. They just have Jesus and they're living their life without God. Do you think Christ is concerned that we go, well, that means we got to sacrifice? No! He expects it. And then second, in view of your personal need to change, your need to change. The first question really dealt with the corporate aspect of being revolutionaries. But when you boil this down into the individual aspect, in view of your personal need to change, are you functioning as a revolutionary or as a defender of the status quo? And I'm talking about your own life. Do you see the immaturities in your life as things that must change? If Jesus is molding us into His image, then He is molding us to be revolutionaries. Revolutionaries don't just get to be revolutionaries about what needs to go on in the world, but they have to be revolutionaries about their own life. I cannot live as a revolutionary if I'm not being that way internally. Some of you cannot be a revolutionary in this world because your life is dominated by emotional drama. Your life is one dramatic event to the next. Everything in your life, you are the male version of a drama queen, or you're the female. Everything is this hyper drama, out of control. Your life is constantly ruled by emotion. And until you treat that immaturity in your life as a revolutionary, you're causing yourself and everybody around you a gigantic mess. And you're never going to be able to be a revolutionary in the cause of Christ because you're incapable of it. Some of you are so bitter. You can't be a revolutionary in the cause of Christ because you're not treating the bitterness in your life with the same revolution that you see Jesus longing to go out into the world with. Your marriage stinks. It stinks. But yet, you justify that. I see pastors do it all the time. They do it all the time. I've been tempted into it. Man, I'm going to live as a revolutionary to help your marriage, but mine stinks, and that's why pastors end up running off with the secretary. But that one really helped the cause of Christ. So, you and I have got to live as revolutionaries in the immaturities of our life, that bitterness that robs us, the jealousies, the enviness, the deplorable materialism that we have. I mean, we as Americans are so financially immature, it's not even funny. There are people who make $150,000 a year. You would think you should be loaded, and yet they're dead up to their eyeballs because they make $150,000 and they spend $200,000. You know, in first grade, we had that math down pretty good. That's negative $50,000. We think we're so mature as Americans, we can't even handle a credit card. You give us a credit card, and we're like some crack addict at a crack buffet. We'll go crazy. No matter what we earn, we spend more. We buy. We can't be the cause of Christ. We can't be revolutionaries because we can't stop buying stuff. And I hope you hear the pronoun we, because I deal with it just as bad as everybody else. So when am I going to treat my financial immaturities as a revolutionary? When am I going to say, God, how do you want me to live so that I can be free financially, I can be free in my time, I can be free in my effort, I can be free in my focus and live as a revolutionary with the gospel? What do I need to do? You know why, men, when we watch the movie Braveheart, we get excited and we all want to be William Wallace? William Wallace. You know why we want to do that? Because he was a revolutionary. I mean, just pick any Mel Gibson movie. You know why we always want to be the Mel Gibson character? Because his character is always some revolutionary. We want to be that. Inside of you is a desire to make a difference. Inside of you is a desire to conquer those immaturities and live free from all this stuff and to go change the world. It's there. It's why you relate to that movie. It's why you want to be that character. So, well, I don't ever want to be that. You know you've dreamed having a kilt and flashing the English. Or maybe you didn't dream that part, but a little weird. I'm not saying that's the part I dream about. I'm just saying, you want to paint your face blue and yell, freedom! And go bash. All of us want to be that. It's inside of us. But until we turn that energy inward and focus on being revolutionaries inwardly in ourselves and allowing the Holy Spirit of God to defeat those spiritual immaturities in our life, we're never going to be that outwardly. So really, question 2 is the first, and question 1 is the result. I pray that we have the courage to do it.